presentation. My name is Jonathan Light. I'm an initiate of the University of Arizona Circle, current medical student and class president at Eastern Virginia Medical School, and it has been my pleasure to serve as one of the conference programming committee members. We've had a wonderful day of meetups and concurrent session workshops. Thank you to all today's presenters and moderators. Please remember that the conference's Leadership Lounge will open this session and will be open for members to connect them at 8 o'clock tonight. Following Dr. Bright's session, there is an opportunity for conference participants to visit with the members of the Society Board of Trustees beginning at 6:45 p.m. It is now my pleasure to introduce Willie Banks, Chair-elect of the Omicron Delta Kappa Board of Trustees. Willie.
Thank you, Jonathan. I too want to express my appreciation to the presenters, moderators, and members of the Conference Programming Committee for all of the work that has gone into presenting an excellent and informative conference. As Jonathan mentioned, later this evening, our Board of Trustees will hold a meetup session for other members to gather with us to discuss the heritage, operation, and future of Omicron Delta Kappa. I hope many of you will join us for a robust conversation. One of the commitments our society has made is to more fully embrace diversity, equity, inclusivity, and social justice in the operations of ODK. Last summer, shortly after the deaths of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery, our society issued a statement reaffirming our values and commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusivity. The statement was followed by a survey asking members about how the society could be more diverse, inclusive, and equitable organization. As an inclusive society, we recognize that the key to promoting and developing effective leadership is to embrace the diversity found amongst leaders on our campuses and in our communities. However, we also took direct action to convey our commitment. The Board of Trustees rewrote our governing documents to require all of the society's committees to consider diversity, equity, and inclusivity in each body's work. We created the position of the National Diversity Officer and appointed Dr. Monique Walker-Pickett to the role. Dr. Walker-Pickett also chairs our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusivity Committee, which is now a governing committee of the Society and our Board of Trustees. The Key Fund was established to provide scholarships and gifts of membership for students from historically marginalized and underrepresented populations. To date, we have secured more than $11,000 for this fundraising initiative. Website resources have been added for members who want to learn more about how to lead in embracing social justice. Information about websites, organizations, and publications related to diversity, equity, and inclusivity are available. The Society also has 2 new awards which recognize individual, community, program, and campus achievement in these areas. Nominations for the Anderstein and Robinson Champion Award and the ODK Community Commitment Award close on May 1st. And as you may have noticed when you registered for the conference, our society is collecting some demographic data for the first time to better understand the diversity of individuals within our membership. While we have made some good progress over the last year, there's always still work to be done. Individuals who would like to get more involved with these initiatives should contact our president and CEO, Dr. Tara Singer at tara@odk.org. Once again, I hope you'll consider joining us for this evening's meetup, and I hope that everyone has a great day at the conference tomorrow. Jonathan?
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Willie. And also thank you to all of the members of the Board of Trustees for your efforts to ensure that the organization continues its work towards being a more diverse and inclusive society. It is now my pleasure to introduce this evening's keynote speaker, Dr. Rick Bright, a 1996 initiate of the Auburn University Montgomery, has had an incredibly interesting leadership journey. From starting college, first majoring in accounting at the University of Kansas, Dr. Bright eventually ended up in Alabama with the expectation that he would study medical technology at the University of Alabama-Birmingham. However, an individual pointed him in the direction of Auburn University Montgomery, and as Dr. Bright will tell you, ending up there entirely changed the trajectory of his life. He became a member of our society, named his Circle's Leaders of the Year in 1997, and eventually enrolled at Emory University, where he received his PhD in immunology and molecular pathogenesis, also known as virology. Dr. Bright has extensive experience in global health, having served with the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Center for Disease Control and Prevention, and scientific advisory boards for the World Health Organization. He also has held positions in the private sector, making significant advancements in vaccine and therapeutic developments for influenza viruses with pandemic potential and new vaccine treatment and testing technologies. In May of last year, he filed a whistleblower complaint regarding the administration's ignoring his warnings about the COVID-19 pandemic. He publicly challenged other government officials about the seriousness of the illness and unproven treatments for the disease. Dr. Bright was demoted and eventually resigned from working for the federal government. Subsequently, several organizations have recognized Dr. Bright for his ethical leadership. He will proudly tell you that he was named one of the Kansans of the Year. Dr. Bright has since gone on to be featured in the award-winning documentary Totally Under Control, and he was recently named Senior Vice President for Pandemic Prevention and Response at the Rockefeller Foundation. Dr. Bright will lead Rockefeller Foundation's collaborative efforts with other organizations to create a pandemic prevention institute in his new role. The institute's goal is to stop future pandemics within the first 100 days after the earliest identification of a disease outbreak. Following Dr. Bright's remarks, Dr. Suzanne Judd, an initiate of the Michigan Technological University Circle and professor and assistant dean of the School of Public Health at the University of Alabama-Birmingham, will facilitate a moderated discussion and answer session with Dr. Bright. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Rick Bright.
Thank you, Jonathan. And also thank you to all the ODK leaders who are tuning in tonight on this Friday evening. I also want to thank Suzanne Judd, whom I'm having the pleasure of chatting with tonight. I don't think I need to tell anyone here, but it is truly an honor to be a member of Omicron Delta Kappa. A quick look at the membership roster at ODK is all it takes to see that you are among some of the greatest leaders in American history. And it's people like you who have and will reshape the world in ways that we cannot even imagine right now towards a better, equal, equitable, diverse, and inclusive society for all of us. I'm really excited tonight, though, to be back in the ODK circle to share my story about leadership under pressure. If you told me this time last year that I would be here today speaking about one of the toughest years of my life, I would have never have believed you. But this last year, I saw firsthand that leadership, character, and integrity can impact and change the world. I attribute many of the leadership qualities that guided me through this last year to opportunities that I experienced while learning at Auburn University at Montgomery and while leading the ODK circle there. Integrity, loyalty, diversity of ideas, and passion, just to name a few. I'm very proud to see that ODK is prioritizing and advancing the ideals of diversity, equity, and inclusion, providing opportunities to a diverse set of leaders to improve their leadership skills, improves leadership for everyone. And organizations all around the world are strengthened by diversity of ideas and diversity in their leadership. Now, 2020 challenged everyone across the world. When the year started, I was the director of the Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority, otherwise known as BARDA. It is probably the most important government office that almost no one has ever heard of. However, BARDA's role is to plan for the worst day of our lives, the day of an accidental release of chlorine gas after a train accident, the day of a terrorist attack on the New York City subway with small explosive devices, the day an angry government launches a nuclear missile, or the emergence of an infectious disease outbreak with pandemic potential. So the vaccines and therapeutics and diagnostics that are available today that hopefully all of you have been able to use or receive, they protect Americans from COVID-19, and they are all as a result of a strategy that was drawn up initially on my whiteboard in BARDA developed by a diverse group of leadership and leaders within BARDA and implemented by a dedicated team of scientists and leaders across the government and across the private sector industry, working hand in hand with a mission to save lives. While my path in 2020 was not quite as I would have expected, I'm very proud of the progress made by the leaders and scientists that I mentored while at BARDA. One of the extremely valuable lessons that I learned this year is that while you may no longer be leading a group, be in their physical presence, you may no longer be mentoring a person directly, it is their success on their own 2 feet that shows your influence as a mentor and the important role of mentorship. It makes me even more grateful for the mentors that I've had along my journey in my personal life, my education, and in my career. And I know that you will be grateful for yours, especially when your moment arrives to stand up, to speak out, and to lead. So Suzanne, it's an honor to speak with you tonight. I must tell everyone I got my COVID vaccine yesterday. So Suzanne, take it easy on me, but I'd love to have the conversation and tell the story.
No problem. At least I'm not there. I can't punch you in the arm. That's probably the worst thing that's going on right now.
Don't do it.
I'm so excited to get to the talking points that you have, but I guess we've got to slow down a little bit. Let's start at the beginning. What things in your past have most contributed to your leadership style today?
Well, the short answer and a long answer. I mean, Suzanne, the short answer is the things that contribute to my character, my leadership. I think number one is failure. The failures I've experienced in life and what you do with failure. Never giving up, always trying again. And the mentorship and the mentoring that I've had in my life. So the long answer is, I mean, I wish I could tell you that life was easy. I wish I could tell you I had it all figured out in high school or in college and knew the next step in life, but I didn't. I had no idea what to do with life or where to go after high school. I came from a large family in a small town in Kansas with 6 siblings, and my mother had 9 siblings, and each of her siblings had about 6 to 10 children. So a really large family, but really no one that went to college. I think I had one uncle that went to college somewhere in there, but after he left Kansas, we didn't see much of him after that. But I did start at the University of Kansas right out of high school. And as Jonathan said, I sought to be an accountant, in an accounting major. It was a subject I found interesting in high school. But once I got to University of Kansas, I learned very quickly I didn't like accounting. And I largely attributed it to the classroom being too hot. So I considered biology, but I hated the early morning labs. I'm not a morning person. And so I quickly switched to psychology and hated it. So I dropped out of college, and I moved to the big city of Kansas City, Missouri, all alone, lost, and defeated. But I found a job, so I read the want ads in the newspaper, and we still had newspapers back then. And I quickly grabbed a job working in a telephone room or a call center or a dance studio. It was a dark room, breathing a lot of secondhand smoke and calling people randomly through a robocall service and offering them 5 free ballroom dance lessons, basically to anyone who would take our call. But however, a fateful day, on a coffee break upstairs from the dance studio one day, this elegant woman swooped over and approached me and asked if I was there for a dance lesson. Of course, I couldn't help but laugh. I'm a Kansas farm boy. But I explained I worked in the phone room. And she asked, however, if I would like to learn to teach ballroom dancing. as impressionable as I was, I said, well, does it pay more than working in the phone room? And since it did, I signed up for my first lesson and began to learn to teach ballroom dancing. So my job, Suzanne, was to take new students. Most of these were women, mature women, often widowed. And I had 4 lessons to move them around the dance floor and learn as much as I could about them, because on that 5th lesson, the goal was to sell them a dance package that cost about $10,000. Now, in less than a year in that role, I was ranked number 2 in our international organization. So really at the top of the league in ballroom dance teaching and ballroom dancing. However, it was there that I met one of my first and most influential mentors in my life, and her name was Polly. And she turned the tables on me in my 4 lessons, in those 4 lessons we had together. And she asked repeatedly why I wasn't in school and what I was planning to do with my life. You see, her son, who was my age, had been killed in an accident coming home from college on Christmas Eve the year before we met. And so it was really important that Polly and I had this connection, and I could listen to her, she could listen to me. And she bought more lessons. And I don't know if it was to learn to dance from a novice instructor as myself, or it was really because she really took an opportunity to mentor me and teach me about her business and how businesses were run and things that I can do if I considered returning to school. And then one day she met me with a challenge. She dared me to quit dancing, follow my dreams, and if I returned to school, she would pay the tuition. And so I took her up on the offer. I quit my job the next day. I enrolled back at the University of Kansas, and I tried really hard to find something that I liked. But one semester in, I still felt lost. It was a large campus. I felt it was really lonely with so many students and being known as a number more than a name. So it just didn't fit me. And so I dropped out again. And I moved back to Kansas City. I found a job in a laboratory, creating marketing materials for new diagnostic tests. So you can see where this is going now. I couldn't keep my head out of the lab. The science was so interesting, and the people seemed so smart. So after about a year, my supervisor, another mentor, she'd been working with me very closely, and she had the talk with me one day because she told me that she felt I was wasting my life working on marketing materials, that I could do much more. She could see I was drawn to the science. And she said if I would return to college, then the company would pay for my tuition and I can get a degree in science. But I really tried and failed twice. And I knew that I needed a complete restart, a complete refresh if I was going to do this. And again, as impressionable as I was as a young man, I read a story in US News and World Report. I remember taking the story into my supervisor and telling her, look, the University of Alabama in Birmingham was just ranked the #1 up and coming med school in the nation. So if I'm going to change my career and start all over again, I'm going to pack up and I'm going to move to Alabama. And that's where I'm going to go learn science and go to med school. So I did that. I packed up, I moved to Alabama. But once there, I really took a little bit of time. I actually learned I had to live in state for a year for in-state tuition because out-of-state tuition was pretty expensive. And so in that year, I took some time to discover myself, and I learned about a smaller campus in Montgomery, Alabama, Auburn University at Montgomery. And I decided to take a self-guided tour one weekend, just roaming the halls to see what it felt like before I made this big leap. I mean, compared to the KU campus, it was small, it was cozy, and it felt like home. And I was roaming the halls of the medical technology building and just bumped into one of the professors that taught medical technology and pharmacology at Auburn University at Montgomery. His name was Jeff Barksdale. And Jeff Barksdale would become the mentor at AUM who changed my life forever. I mean, we had a conversation and he was honest with me. He looked at my transcript. It was full of C's and I's for incomplete. Anyone who's ever taken a course and stopped and dropped out knows there's some I's and those I's revert to F's. So it wasn't a very impressive transcript. He wasn't thrilled, but he did say that we could work with it and that he would give me a chance and guide and mentor me if I was ready to try again. So I get emotional. This is really impactful. The people in my life, these mentors, they plant something in you that is so emotionally impactful. Jeff gave me a job washing glassware in his lab. He spent many hours with me to teach me about science and about a career in science and opportunities and leadership and compassion. And he told me years later that he really was not that optimistic when we first met. But he never gave up on me, Suzanne. The faculty at AUM were more than family. They pitched in to help me at every turn. I learned about ODK and I wanted to become a leader. I wanted to be able to give back to these generous mentors who helped me along the way. So at 26 years old, and with the grace and patience of these three impactful mentors in my life, I finally found my passion for science. And I knew exactly what I wanted to do. And I graduated AUM at 30 years old, magna cum laude.
That is amazing. That is so impressive.
And yes, and an honor, Suzanne, to be the ODK Circle Leader of the Year, and an honor to go onward to get my PhD at Emory, and to decide at that moment to help other people, to give back. And I put in my screensaver, Suzanne, to save the world. And that's still my screensaver today, to save the world. And I think that's the mission in life.
Really, really impressive. It impresses me your willingness to share with these people that were strangers first and then became mentors. It just really is incredible. And it sounds like you met some really wonderful people and had some great mentors. What characteristics do you look for in a mentor, and what makes you a great mentor to others?
That's a good question. You know, I think it's really odd. I'm not sure that we always realize a mentor is a mentor in that moment. I don't think anyone says to themselves, I'm a mentor, I'm going to mentor someone, or I'm going to be mentored. I think with leaders, with people with strong character and leadership, that mentoring happens, and it happens because of the characters of the people involved. And it's a two-way street. I think some of the skills that are really important for mentoring is listening to each other and showing them an unconditional compassion. Don't judge people. I mean, we're all human and we've all taken different journeys that have put us in this moment. And I also think that one of the most important characteristics of a leader or mentor is really walking the walk, not just talking the talk. It's not exactly what you say to a person, I think, but it's what they see you do. The person you are mentoring, I've learned, is watching you, seeing how you handle yourself in challenging situations, seeing how you treat other people, seeing how you handle your setbacks and your failure and how you bounce back. And the fact that you, as a person, show that vulnerability and let someone see you experience all of this and share that experience with others who look up to you, even on your worst day, that I believe is leadership. Leaders lead by example. And they also let you trip. They also let you fall. And they're there to catch you. They're there to pick you back up. And they understand, and you understand in that moment, that you're equipped to handle it, and you go on.
So 2020 has been quite a year. I mean, here we all are sitting at our Zoom screens in our own houses instead of together somewhere at a leadership conference. We've got this global pandemic, a social justice movement that has really changed the way a lot of us view the world. Just tons of change, but they've been even more change for you in the past 15 months. What keeps you focused?
Ah, well, Suzanne, I trained for the moment in time. I trained over 20 years to be able to respond to a pandemic before the COVID-19 pandemic hit. In fact, in my training, I learned about the 1918 Spanish influenza pandemic that rattled the globe. It killed tens of millions of people. And I learned that some of the stories claim that that pandemic originated in Kansas. So I really used that as my North Star. My motivation for 20 years was that a boy from Kansas would be able to stop the next pandemic. My only focus during the last 15 months was on saving lives. In BARDA, we knew exactly what to do, but there was no leadership at the top to coordinate the country or the world. So we set up the best scientific teams we could across the government, aligned and partnered very quickly with highly experienced scientists in the private sector. And we drew up those plans and implemented a strategy pushing for urgently needed resources to stay in front of that rapidly spreading and deadly virus. However, I never anticipated that politics would play such a domineering role over science and scientific integrity. I never imagined that I would find myself in those crosshairs between science and politics. There was no course at AUM or Emory that I ever took that could teach me how to respond when I was faced with such adversity and how to come out with the truth. So the skills that I relied on in that moment were those that I learned from my mentors, were those that we all embody as leaders with character and integrity. In that moment, I could not be silent. I could be silent, but to me, that would be being complicit. I had to speak up to save lives. Now, honestly, I didn't fully appreciate the actions that would follow. I did not know that I would be personally attacked by the President of the United States. But my gut instinct told me to stand up and to shine a light on all the things that I believed were worsening and prolonging the pandemic, leaving more people to suffer and to die. I didn't realize at the time that my response would steer the global narrative to put science back in play and put it over politics. And really importantly, I didn't realize the hundreds of thousands of notes of support that I would get from scientists and students and parents and teachers and doctors and nurses and others from around the world. Many saying how they felt empowered to do more because they saw me take that lead. I was so honored to be asked to serve on the Biden-Harris COVID-19 Advisory Board to help guide the new administration and on their response to the pandemic. And now it's really such an honor to have a leading role in the Rockefeller Foundation, all with my same mission, the focus on saving lives. I believe, Suzanne, that pandemics are preventable. And I believe we can develop an entirely new way to detect these warning signals, but we have to share them in an equitable way across the globe to be able to stop a pandemic as quickly as possible. This is my focus now, and I believe we will save hundreds of millions of lives going forward with this new approach.
That's great, Rick. It's really exciting to hear you start talking about some of the things related to the pandemic. You and I both trained at Emory. There's a lot of focus at Emory on emerging infectious diseases and pandemic management. What is the one thing you wish people understood about this pandemic?
There's a lot. Let me try two, because I think the first is very important. I don't think a lot of people understand the critical role that individuals play in containing and stopping the virus. You as an individual, all of us as individuals, are actually empowered to save lives. All we have to do is follow those basic steps, those public health steps of wearing your mask and getting vaccinated and social distancing. Those basic steps empower you to help stop the pandemic and protect your family. And then I think another second thing that I learned very much in being in the public eye over the last year is that science isn't the enemy. The scientific process isn't changing the narrative. As scientists, we continue to learn more about the virus. And the more we learn, the more we know, our recommendations will evolve. And the science isn't trying to trick you. I do know it can get confusing at times, but let's not attack the science. We do need to do a much better job at communicating science so everyone can understand it better to do their part. But science is really on your side. And I know that right now, everyone is tired of these COVID restrictions, of wearing their mask and staying inside. But it's really, really important. If I can do one social public service announcement, it's really important that though we may feel like we are done with this virus is not done with us. It is far from being done with us. So now is the time to use your power to double down on wearing your mask, keeping your distance, getting your vaccine as soon as you can. And if we stick to these practices, Suzanne, then I promise you, we will get to our new normal as soon as possible.
Absolutely. You mentioned something else earlier about controlling the pandemic and how we do this going forward so that it's more equitable. How do you support diversity in science and especially in the leadership roles?
You know, I had to learn that the hard way. I personally have learned of the value of what I call a rich mosaic of perspectives and ideas. But to get to that, I learned it's very, very important to invite that richness to the table and to listen. I mean, as I built out BARDA from a pretty good sized organization, but expanding our partnerships and our new initiatives at BARDA, it was very painfully clear to me that our system, the system we were operating in the government and in society, was very monochromatic, I'll call it. Very monochromatic, very dogmatic, and overly exclusive, certainly not inclusive at all. So what I learned in order to be able to be successful in our mission to save lives, to save every life, we needed to reach everyone. And to reach everyone, we needed to hear from everyone. And you can't do that inside an ivory tower or a government fortress or through special handshakes or expensive lobbyists marketing and selling access. That is a system built on I think the wealthiest of our society, and certainly not the brightest or the most innovative or culturally or intellectually best. And that system fails us every time. So to change the system, I learned is absolutely critical to be intentional. It's very uncomfortable at times, but you have to always be intentional and focus on building the most beautiful and productive and culturally rich mosaic team that you can to achieve your mission.
Rick, I totally agree with you. And I want to talk a little bit more about it. Do you have some specific examples that people can use to do this?
Well, yes. I mean, there are some very simple things. Actually, they're not simple in practice. They're simple for me to describe. But I mean, you have to make an effort to show diversity and encourage diversity and inclusiveness in your organization. And that starts from very simply, I think, making sure you have diversity at your table in your leadership roles. It's important to intentionally invite women and people of color to the table to present and represent your organization. They are so underrepresented in science and in government throughout and in leadership roles. So you have to go that extra mile to achieve your goals of diversity and inclusiveness. You cannot be satisfied with the status quo. And you also, I mean, to me, it was awkward at times. I refused to speak on panels that were lacking diversity. Just absolutely refused to be part of the status quo. And then I think it's important to encourage your staff, lead by example, and encourage your staff to participate in the development of a diverse future, a future of scientists and leaders. Participate in local science fairs and be a judge in those science fairs. It sounds simple, but it's really important. Getting involved with your schools, promoting opportunities for internships. Put yourself in weird places. I mean, in forums that you don't know. Make yourself uncomfortable. This is how I learned to understand and learn more about diversity, honestly. Entering the room where you're the outsider, where you're the minority, where you are the person who doesn't know really the rest of the things, are not really in the vibe or the groove for that. And learn how to work with that perspective. Invite contrarian views to the table. If I have folks that I know absolutely disagree with me and don't have any problem telling me they disagree with me, and those are the people I reach out to a lot to put at the table so I can listen and learn and keep an open mind. I'm very uncomfortable sometimes in those situations, but I learn. I'm very uncomfortable sometimes to even ask questions about diversity or gender or inclusiveness. I find that sometimes it can be awkward, but I do it anyway because that's where I learn, and that's where I have learned the value of that richness in the culture and how that diversity of ideas and perspective seeds a wealth of knowledge, and that is how we are going to shape the future.
This is great. I have one last question for you before we open it up to see if anyone in the audience has questions. What advice do you have for the young leaders of today?
Well, that's a good question. And you know, I think some of the things you probably hear a lot, but it's really important. And I hope my life story, just a glimpse of my life story, shows the value of some of this, but maybe I'll just stick with 3 or 4. But number one, never give up. Not everything you do is going to be successful. You are going to fail, but try again. Try a different way. Learn from that failure and never give up. Number 2, remember your core values, the integrity, your character, diversity, inclusiveness. Make those your core values and don't be afraid to stand up for them. You are in the club when you stand up for these principles of equity and inclusiveness and diversity. So use that, speak up. That is going to change the world, I promise you. And a third thing, you remember leadership is a journey. I was only able to give you a snapshot of my very interesting journey in life, but it's a journey and it's a compilation of your experiences. So starting today, right now, with every person you meet, remember it's a two-way mirror. While you're looking up to a mentor, there are always other people looking up to you. And remember to pay those lessons backwards and forwards. And then forward, I think this is really, really important. It's important to trust yourself. When your moment comes to take a stand, to speak out, or to do the right thing, I can assure you it's going to be stressful. But take it from someone who took the leap and survived. It is worth it. Your life will be so fulfilled by standing up for what is right. And you and many others who have taught you along the way and who look up to you today millions of people who you don't even know, they're all watching and they're all counting on you. So trust yourself. It'll be okay. You're not alone. Just lead.
Wow, that is a very powerful sentiment at the end, and it can be so challenging for people to do when the moment comes to take that opportunity and just lead. Um, I know for myself, the same thing was true as this pandemic came to be. I'm sure you were in the same boat. I'm an epidemiologist by training, and prior to 2020, most people thought that meant I was a skin doctor.
Could
I'm
be.
sure virologists are probably pretty similar. When you said virologist, what did people say before 2020? Did they even have a response?
Not much. It confused a lot of people. I think, get the word virus out of it, but it's a complicated word, and I think one of the challenges we have as scientists is breaking down the complexity of what we know and learn, and how it can be valuable in society, and how everyone is touching on epidemiology. Everyone's touching on virology, and interestingly, with the vaccines out there today, the COVID-19 vaccines, we're all learning about immunology and the immune response and herd immunity and all these terms out there. So it's important that we find those ways to communicate and translate that complexity, things that we do, so the rest of the world knows how they can use it in their daily life.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that we haven't talked about yet was your rising as a leader and mentoring employees and staff and working with a wide group of people. As you started your career at BARDA, how did you rise through the ranks and move your career up as a leader?
I started in BARDA I was working at a nonprofit organization called PATH. And in that organization, I was working to develop new technologies for pandemic influenza, for vaccine development, and technologies that could be transferred to lower and middle income countries. I've always felt the value and the need to bring technologies to developing countries, to give people an opportunity to make their own vaccine. And knowing that in the pandemic, as we're still seeing in this pandemic, that many countries around the world are last in line. It's the wealthiest countries that always have access to vaccines. And so in that path, I was part of this program that was led by BARDA. And then eventually BARDA transferred me, I transferred into BARDA to lead this program. It was the smallest program in BARDA, to work in 13 developing countries to teach them how to make pandemic influenza vaccine. And we worked in those countries and where there was less than a million capability to make less than 1 million doses of pandemic influenza vaccine. In 10 years' time, working with the World Health Organization in each of those countries and their governments, we now have the capacity to make 1 billion doses of pandemic vaccine. So I had that passion taking it into BARDA when they hired me to lead that little program, but very quickly, I was promoted not only for my ability to work internationally and bring that global impact, but promoted to develop drugs and lead the drug development program for pandemic influenza, and then promoted to be the deputy director of all of the influenza programs, and then the director of the pandemic influenza division. All along the way, building not only my skill set to lead individuals, but learning how to mentor our teams and to broaden our reach and our capacity. And I think it's that experience I had working internationally where I really learned the value of that different cultural perspective, ethnic perspective. And honestly, it was interesting in some of the countries that I worked in Vietnam, for example, I'll use a good example. There was one company in Vietnam that I worked with that was led by all females. And I said, this is weird, was it weird or was it really forward leaning? And at first it felt awkward, but it's like, it was really forward leaning. And it taught me so much because we were just used to in science and in manufacturing and engineering, seeing mostly men at the table. so it opened my eyes. And then I brought that perspective into BARDA. And I really tried to hire females as much as possible and make sure that when I had our annual meeting in BARDA, our annual conference with thousands of people attending in the private sector and public sector, I set a rule in place that every panel we had would be at least 50% female. And our speakers, I actually invited and had the first female keynote speaker in that government meeting in over 12 years of its history. And I actually invited and had the first transgendered speaker in a conservative government administration. And
That's quite a feat.
honestly, the heck I went through to get there, to get that accepted, it was met with resistance and pushback, and it emboldened me even more. And you know you're doing something right when you see this pushback and a discomfort from the status quo and the dogma. And it changed everything that we did from that moment on. And it empowered women, it empowered minorities, it empowered people of different genders. And to me, that was something that really warms my heart to think back and how we built that culture within BARDA.
That's fantastic. We've got some questions rolling in from the audience now. What suggestions do you have to us as leaders on our campuses and in our communities to combat the anti-intellectual trend in fearing and questioning science simply because it doesn't fit someone's worldview? Just a small question for you to get going.
Oh, that's a tough one, right? No, I mean, I do think it's important to hold your ground. I mean, there's a lot of anti-science movement out there today. There's a lot of anti-vaccine movement. There's a lot of this anti-intellectual trend. I think part of it is incumbent upon us to break down the message in a simpler way, to communicate in a different way. We tend to, as humans, probably communicate with people who are like us, who look like us, who are in our social circles or in our neighborhood. And I think to combat some of this fear that we're seeing about science, we have to combat those or break down those barriers of communication and learn to enlist trusted messengers in different communities. When I think about the vaccine hesitancy that we're seeing across the country today, or people who are afraid of the vaccine or the science behind the vaccine, I learned that it comes from certain communities, communities of color that have been neglected through the years, communities of color who have been inappropriately experimented on, and so have very valid reasons not to trust science or the government. And, you know, to me, they have valid reasons to be, to question and to push back. And to us as leaders and as scientists, it is up to us to break down that message in a palatable way to build trust. And I think you do that by enlisting and going into different communities and enlisting local messengers into church, in community centers, in corner stores, in dark alleys, because we have to reach everyone. And if we don't, then these are the people who suffer the most in a pandemic, and not just in a pandemic, but in our daily life, in our health inequity that we have in our country and around the world. And those are the things that I think we have to do on campus and in the community to change the world and solve this problem.
Thank you for that. We've got one more, someone talking about when they taught leadership courses, struggling to get students to believe that they would actually face real ethical dilemmas. And now, as someone who's lived ethics, as you have, Rick, what suggestions do you have to help us engage others in ethical discussions so they do the right thing when they need to?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, right. I had classes in ethics. I had life lessons and ethics, little moments to do the right thing in life or call the right shot. But it's really hard to teach. I mean, I do think that building on the principles of character are so important, and leading by example is hard to talk about. It's hard to have a scenario in a book or a classroom or a role play even. Nothing prepared me, in terms of a class or a lesson for standing on the stage last year. It was almost a year ago. Today's the 9th, and this was on the 20th of April. So almost a year ago today. But I remember before I took that stand, walking through my neighborhood, taking a walk and then getting a breath of fresh air. And everything inside of me, maybe it's the lessons, maybe it's the characters, the people, all the teachers, all the friends. It all came to me. And I do remember seeing different faces and hearing my mentors at that moment. One mentor I had at the CDC always had a statement, do the right thing. And that sounds simple, but every time I would go to him with questions, he'd say, just do the right thing. And these are the things that came to me in that moment. And I went back, I called my lawyers, and I said, let's go live and let's have a press conference and let's take a lead and just see what happens. And so I think on campus, if there are opportunities that you can share your life as a teacher, as a mentor with others, not tell them here's a theoretical scenario, something that might happen, but open yourself up, your vulnerability, be vulnerable, and let them see an opportunity. Maybe you have, I was very involved on my campus. I got to see difficult discussions at the staff level, at the faculty level, faculty staff meetings on different issues that came up. And I was also on the student disciplinary committee. I was the Chief Justice of our Supreme Court. So I got to see those opportunities. I had those opportunities to see real life things happening on campus that were called into question or called into judgment. And I had the chance to make real life decisions that impacted other students' lives and whether or not they would be expelled from school or something else would happen to them or go through some training, and even at the faculty level. So I think those are some of the scenes and opportunities that you might give students and expose students to that would better prepare them for that moment when their moment comes.
What's the most important leadership lesson you've learned, and how has it proven invaluable? Might be that do the right thing we just talked about.
Do the right thing. I mean, listening is very, very important as a leader, and I can't say it enough because now it's just part of me, but getting that broad perspective. I mean, I like to have, and someone again told me this one time in my life, have 3 people in your life that you learn from. Have someone older, have someone much young. In my life, it's someone older, it's someone younger, much younger, and someone just, almost random, but a constant randomness in your life that you talk to, you learn from, you communicate with. And that gives you a chance to sort of practice leadership, but also learn from those leaders that are at different levels in your life. And you're constantly I love learning from younger people. Not just a computer skill or how to use an app, which I have to learn a lot, but learning what's happening in the world today from their eyes has taught me a lot about the things I need to do at my level, at my age, to be part of the culture and the dialogue of the world going forward. And so I think that's really important as leadership, to have that mixture of perspectives around you.
That's great. We have time for about one more question. This one could be a whole nother hour discussion. How do you select a mentor, and how do you select a mentee?
I can't answer that. I mean, to me, it just happens. I don't think I've ever intentionally tried to be a mentor, or someone come to me and said, well, I actually have people come to me and said, would you be my mentor? Would you mentor me? And then you go through some rote skills about, let's follow up and talk to each other, et cetera. And that's one type of mentoring. But I would say these most impactful mentors in my life just happened. It just clicks. And sometimes you don't even know you're mentoring. It's amazing to learn. And I mean, it's a rare opportunity to learn, but I learned last year when I took that stand and I spoke up and I took on an institution and a government. I learned that people are watching, and I was a mentor for millions of people and never even knew it. And I think that is the most important kind of mentoring and being mentored opportunity that happens in life.
Rick, I really wish we had more time. This has been really a delight talking to you tonight. But I have to ask, do you have one final thought for the group today?
Lots of thoughts. I wish we had more time too. And I do hope that this is all helpful for the team. Speaking with people at ODK, again, you are the world's best leaders, and it's so inspiring to see the things that you're doing today. And Suzanne, I've really enjoyed talking with you and the many leaders who are tuning in to watch us tonight. So I guess if I were to leave with one thought, okay, I'm going to paraphrase something. I'm going to embellish it a little bit, something I heard in the past. Honestly, I think a version of it, maybe President Obama may have even mentioned in some talking points, talk about a leader. But I would like to say it because it's stuck with me. And so listen closely to this and hope I can explain it. But I want people to know that the world can be a very scary place. And many times it can feel very dark, maybe even a little desolate. I mean, especially if we look back over the past year, this experience that we've had together of being cooped up and isolated in so many ways. But I believe that that's why we as leaders see a spark. We can see a spark that lies within the hearts and the minds of humanity. And I believe by making amazing discoveries, by creating solutions that feel impossibly perfect in their ability to help others or protect others, and by working together, and I mean all of us working together, we can ignite that spark. I know we can make a difference. I know we can change the world. So this, my fellow ODK members, this is your moment in time. This is your moment to lead. And trust me, the world is watching. So thank you, Suzanne. Thanks to everyone.
Thank you, Rick. It was great chatting with you tonight.
Thank you.
Dr. Bright, your leadership and commitment to the health of all humans is very inspiring. Thank you for all that you and your colleagues at the Rockefeller Foundation are doing to prevent future pandemics. Dr. Judd, thank you for facilitating the question and answer session. This was wonderful. Don't forget to participate in the online gamification challenges that are being held through the conference. By completing challenges, you receive points. The individuals with most points at the end of the conference will be eligible for prizes, including a 30-minute Zoom session with one of our 3 keynote speakers, including Dr. Bright, a personal meeting with one of our board of trustee members, and some special surprises. If you have questions about the challenges, contact the Challenge Master through your EventMobi app. Also, please remember that there will be a meetup with the Board of Trustees beginning at 6:45 p.m. this evening. In the morning tomorrow, there will be a session at 11 a.m. Eastern for Circle officers with the engaging Nancy Hunter-Denny, founder and executive board lead of Lead 365. Hamedia Al-Safani, the current National Student Vice Chair, will also make remarks during that session. The formal welcome for day 3 of the conference will begin at noon, followed by 3 blocks of concurrent sessions. The inspiring and energetic Summer Owens will give the conference's last featured address tomorrow at 4:30 p.m., and the day will end with the conference's closing celebration, which will begin at 5:45 p.m. Once again, thank you for joining us for Navigating 21st Century Leadership. We'll look forward to your continued participation in the conference tomorrow, and have a good night.